Tonight, Corbyn makes his move and launches a new political party. Should Labour be worried? The former leader of the opposition's claiming that 80,000 people have signed up in the first few hours alone. But there was some confusion over its name. I apologise for the pictures that you're seeing now. That is obviously on Gaza and not the Jeremy Corbyn political party that was clarified that it would be called Your Party, as some had first thought. This is what he said a little while earlier.
It's not messy at all. It's a totally coherent approach. It's democratic, it's grassroots, and it's open.
Also tonight, we'll look ahead to the 5-day resident doctors' strike now just hours away, where Streeting says he deeply regrets it's going ahead. We've got a special report from our political editor Beth Rigby on the battle that Starmer can't afford to lose, welfare versus warfare. And we'll be looking ahead to Donald Trump's 4-day golfing extravaganza in Scotland, which starts tomorrow. Visiting us tonight, Reenap Yorworth and Mercy Muroki, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening and welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, before we start tonight, I do want to start with the new statement that we've just had from the Prime Minister. It's on Gaza. Keir Starmer has said that he will hold an emergency call with France and Germany about the situation in Gaza on Friday. He says the situation there, in his words, have reached new depths. I just want to bring you that statement. It's just coming in right now and, of course, wanted to bring it to you straight away. He said the suffering and starvation that is unfolding in Gaza is unspeakable and indefensible. While the situation has been grave for some time, it has reached new depths and continues to worsen. We are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe. I will hold an emergency call with partners tomorrow where we will discuss what we can do urgently to stop the killing and get people the food they desperately need while pulling together all the steps necessary to build a lasting peace. That statement coming in from Keir Starmer this evening on Gaza. We can bring now our political correspondent, Serena Bargasing, in here. Serena, this has just come through now, hasn't it? What's the Prime Minister said?
Yeah, so I think it's a ramping up of the rhetoric, showing how serious they've become. It's a bit of a moment to get this sort of late in the evening outside of parliamentary terms. So we were a bit surprised by it. But as you mentioned, it's quite strong language, saying the suffering and starvation unfolding is unspeakable and indefensible, and that there will be this emergency call. So an action as well coming. I would say behind the scenes, I've been speaking to MPs and there's been increasing pressure on Number 10 and the Prime Minister to be speaking much more clearly and starkly about this issue. They feel, especially as they're going into their constituencies over recess, that this is something their constituents feel really strongly about, and they don't feel that the government is matching where their constituents are. I'm hearing that over 100 actually have written to David Lammy. They've written many letters, and they feel that he's potentially not where they are. You had David Lammy also doing the morning rounds earlier this week, and I think some comments that he mentioned didn't seem to go as far as MPs would like. You've also got Wes Streeting breaking with the government earlier this week, calling for Palestinian statehood, which is, a senior cabinet member there going outside of government policy. This is a clear moment, I feel. And if you look at the last paragraph of this statement, it says, "We are clear that statehood is the inalienable right of Palestinian people." Now, that's not going as far as saying the UK will recognise Palestine as a state, but it's pretty far. And it foreshadows a conference that's happening next week, a joint Saudi Arabia and French conference that was happening. I understand it was originally meant to be looking at Palestinian statehood. Now they think it will just be looking at a two-state solution. But it comes in the way of that. And I think MPs feel like this is a moment where they can really capitalise on that. And Number 10 clearly seem to be listening.
It's interesting when you're saying about that kind of pressure coming from MPs, and it's something that we could have been picking up on this programme as well. Emily Thornberry, for example, speaking to us as early as this week, talking about, in her view, the need to recognise Palestine as a state. She wants the government to go further as well. I'm also interested in the fact that he's obviously talking to international allies here. Do you think that there is, I guess, a move from particularly some of those European countries to try and come together in order to push Israel, but also potentially send a message to America as well?
I think that was the UK's position, that they were never going to be they were never going to be not in lockstep with their international partners. You had different international partners saying different things, as you said, trying to put pressure on Trump. You had Macron earlier this month saying, going quite far in terms of Palestinian statehood, but it seems that has shifted, and they do want to work in tandem, and it does seem that if there is going to be a shift in this, it will have to be all together, and the UK won't be going ahead of any of them.
Yeah, that does feel like a consistent message there. Serena, thank you so much for coming in and bringing us up to date on the latest from Downing Street as well. If you could just stay there, that'd be great. Thank you. Well, really important story, of course, on Gaza, and also what Number 10 are going to do about it. Keir Starmer's reaction to it as well. And if there's any more movement on that story, we'll, of course, bring you that just as soon as it happens. In the meantime, we have had some other news in Westminster today. A new party on the left, fronted by Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana, has officially been created. And look, today does feel like a significant moment with that. The left has mobilised, and look, we should take them seriously, not just because Jeremy Corbyn is one of the most recognisable faces in British politics, but we speak a lot about reform taking votes on the right. But actually, polling by More in Common shows a Corbyn-led party could win 10% of the vote, which could really hurt Keir Starmer's Labour Party. But look, if this new party is going to be the disruptive force that it wants to be, it's not going to be easy. Setting up a new party from scratch is tough. Just ask Change UK. Even Nigel Farage went through UKIP and the Brexit Party before managing to win that handful of seats with Reform UK. They haven't registered the party yet. They haven't come up with a name. That apparently will be decided at their first ever party conference, which they don't yet have a date for either. And with a mix of former Labour MPs and the Gaza Independents sitting for the new party in Parliament, what will their whipping arrangements be? Support for Palestine is something that clearly unites them, but they will need a policy platform as well. And getting all of this right won't be easy. It's been a bumpy launch. But if the more established parties face insurgents on the right and the left, well, that could really shake things up an awful lot. Well, our political correspondent, Serena Singh, has been speaking to Jeremy Corbyn about their plans as well. Serena, you've been talking to Jeremy Corbyn today. What happened?
Well, they're not off to the best start in terms of how they've delivered this in their communication strategy. We knew for a while that they've been working on a political party. Then you had the statement from Zarah Sultana saying she was quitting Labour to join this new party, but it was only 2 days later when Corbyn seemed to acknowledge that. Then you had today's seemingly unexpected announcement of something that we already really knew. But when you speak to them, they're full of excitement. They're really committed. They've been working on this for a long time, private chats in Westminster, a lot of people who've either left the Labour Party or who are still on the left and want a new coalition. I think something that's levelled against them is whether they can agree. As you can see with the mixed messages on communication, that's starting to feed in this accusation that the left have always had for a long time. Can they get their act together? Can they be a serious party? And speaking to people who are behind the scenes, there's still a lot to be done. So there's branding that they haven't done. They haven't registered the new party in the Electoral Commission. The idea is that you set this all up for the local elections next year, but they still haven't decided whether councillors will be fit under the official party or if they'll wear a logo that just shows their affiliation to the party or not. I asked Corbyn today about whether these independents, who seemingly seem to support this new left-wing coalition, whether they would be happy for him to be their leader, because they essentially are just an alliance at the moment. He couldn't quite answer that, but of course he is the co-leader with Zarah Sultana. And then there's no Zarah anywhere.
Yeah.
That's something I asked him about whether she's in lockstep with him. He insists that he is. She's fully on board, but no one has really seen her. And the problem with that is that it kind of looks like a Labour Corbyn 2.0 party. And how can he prove that this is something different, this is something new, there won't be any factionalism, and what will that look like? So I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
And they've put out a joint statement, haven't they, that I think we can read now. So they say the system is rigged when this government says there is no money for the poor but billions for war. We cannot accept these injustices, and neither should you. We will only fix the crises in our society with a mass redistribution of wealth and power, and that means taxing the very richest in our society. I mean, like you say, it's sort of signed by both of them, isn't it? It goes on to say, our movement is made up of people of all faiths and none. The great dividers want you to think that the problems in our society are caused by migrants or refugees. They're not. It's time for a new kind of political party. But she wasn't at the launch then? She wasn't there when you spoke to Jeremy Corbyn? What?
She wasn't. He said it was a sort of organisational problem, that she was needed elsewhere. But again, doesn't scream a very slick operation. I guess their strength, speaking to that statement, is that they've essentially given a list of where they can attack Labour on. So easy things like winter fuel payment, welfare, PIP, all of these things, on Gaza as well. They're seizing on opportunities where they think Labour is very weak. And you've got backbench Labour MPs calling out the government on where they're failing. So they do have a strength in that sense, and they sense that the public is behind them. Actually, some polling suggests that they could eat into Labour's share by almost 10%. These are huge numbers. There's clearly an appetite for it. But I think the organisation and the structure is something that they'll have to deal with. I mean, they've got 6 MPs now, which would be quite a big party. That would be bigger than Reform UK's parliamentary party. So they are a serious force to contend with if they can organise. I did actually ask Jeremy Corbyn if it was a messy announcement, if he thought that. He completely disagreed.
Let's have a listen.
It's a very easy question to start. You're starting a new party. What's it going to be called?
It's your party. We're going to decide when we had all the responses, and so far the response rate has been massive. They've been coming in at 500 a minute wanting to support and join the new party, and we're open to suggestions for names. So if you've got a good suggestion, bring it on. I want it to be something that's inclusive, effective to mobilise people and bring people in, and so we're looking at all that, but it'll be short and inclusive, and so any ideas out there, I'm ready to receive them.
Just on paper, it sounds like you've launched a party, but you don't have a name. You don't know when the inaugural conference is going to be. There was some confusion over who would co-lead the party. You had Zarah Sultana announce that she would with you, and then 2 days later she wouldn't. It looks a bit messy, doesn't it?
It's not messy at all. It's a totally coherent approach. It's democratic, it's grassroots, and it's open. And Zarah and I have sent out this statement today, which has had a massive pickup already. The Independent Alliance of MPs have sent out a broadly similar, identical statement in support of it as well. And we will then develop from there. But the broad political principles are there, and that's the important thing, important message to get across. Listen, people have had enough out there. They're fed up with seeing cuts to their services, threats to personal independence payments, continuing child poverty, waspy women shortchanged by the government, and the only thing they can find money for is more weapons of war.
And you say Zarah Sultana will co-lead it with you, but so far it's been your name announced. You're here doing the interview. Will she really co-lead it? What's her role in all this? Where is she today?
We're working absolutely together on this. She happens to be, as far as I know, at this moment in Coventry. I was in touch with her just a few moments ago, so it's all fine. We're working very well together, all of us.
And can you achieve on the left what Reform has done on the right? And do you see any similarities between this new party and Reform UK?
Reform only offer a message of division and blame. All they do is say that every social problem in our society is somehow or other the fault of extremely vulnerable minorities. They are a dangerously divisive force in our society. What we're offering instead is to bring people together so we collectively face the issues of poverty, the issues of bad housing, the issues of underfunded education. So we face those issues together. Reform are a road to danger, not a road to any improvement in people's lives.
People might think this is a rerun of a Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. How can you convince people that that's not the case?
Well, it's going to be a very different structure. The Labour Party is a very top-down, highly centralised party that is full of control freaks who want to control whatever goes on within the party.
But you were at the top at that time. You could change this.
Yes, I did a great deal to try and change that by establishing community organisers, and during my leadership of the party the membership went up to 600,000, the largest ever in its history. I'd be surprised if it's even a third of that figure now.
So the independent MPs have suggested that they will sign up to this new party. How's that going to work in the Commons? Are you their leader now?
We don't have a parliamentary leader. We have a group of us who work very effectively together.
But will the independent MPs who now don't have a leader, will they accept you as their co-leader with Zarah Sultana under this new structure?
We'll have to decide on that, but it's not terribly important who is the parliamentary leader of it. We work together, we recognise each other's strengths.
Well, it might be an issue on whipping them. Who would be the chief whip, for example?
We don't have a
vote?
chief whip. We meet once a week, go through the issues that are coming up, and generally speaking, there is no problem on debate. We agree on how we're going to vote on a particular thing. Where there isn't agreement, which is very, very rare, then we say, that's it, we'll all vote our own way on it, but we won't attack each other for how they vote.
Do you agree, though? Because if you look at their voting record, it doesn't look like a left-wing coalition. You've got independents voting against private school tax, and you had one independent who voted to keep cousin marriage. Is that a left-wing coalition that you would like to lead?
Listen, there was a difference of opinion on that. Their concern was about small Muslim schools that they felt were being unfairly taxed. They were not particularly wishing to defend the much bigger private schools. I have a strong view that the private schools should pay tax, and I voted accordingly. So, was there a difference? Yeah. Did we fall out? No.
And then just in terms of who's behind the party, your company website, Your Party UK, is managed by the Peace and Justice Project. One of those patrons is Len McCluskey. This week, the former Unite boss, according to an internal report, was enjoying private jets, football tickets. Is he someone you want included in this new left-wing party?
I've known Len for many, many years, and I've worked with Len on large numbers of industrial disputes. Best to wait for the full report to come out and then make a judgment on it.
The report, though, said that he overruled advice from staff and union lawyers in signing contracts. Is it appropriate that he's connected to this party?
Well, I think we need to hear Len's side of the story on that first. I haven't heard Len's side of the story.
So he is involved at the moment, and you'll wait for an investigation to decide?
Yes.
Right, lots to chat about there. We're joined by YouGov's Director of Political Analytics, Patrick English. Also, I want to bring in our panel for this evening too, the leader of Plaid Cymru, that is Sarina Bjorworth, and the former Conservative advisor, Mercy Muroki. Sarina is still here as well, multitasking today for us, Sarina. Right, Patrick, I want to start with you first, because I guess the question that everyone wants to know is there a space for this party in Westminster politics? You know, could they do well?
Yeah, good evening, Sophie. There certainly is a space, but it's a very congested space. There's a lot of frustration among what we might call the left bloc of voters in British politics right now, many of whom voted for Labour at the last election, but many of whom also voted for the Green Party and other parties such as Plaid Cymru and the SNP and some independent candidates too. There's a lot of frustration among that bloc with the Labour Party, with their policies, with their positions on issues such as disability payments, winter fuel, the situation in Gaza. And so there is an opening, I think, for a party like this. But the Green Party have been occupying that sort of political space quite well up until now. And when we look at the polling to see what kind of impact a Corbyn's sort of party, a Corbyn Zarah party might have, the Greens will be taking as much of a hit as Labour. And that's an important thing to note, I think, that this sort of party will be taking votes from many different elements of the left-wing bloc in British politics.
That's interesting that it's not just kind of Labour who could be under threat from this, but the Green Party as well. And I think you've done some polling recently on this as well that I think hopefully we should be able to show too. Would you consider voting for the following parties? Labour 30%, Lib Dems 28%, Reform 28%, Greens 28%, and then the new Corbyn-led party 18%. I mean, 18%, that's not bad, is it?
No, it's not bad at all. Now, we must keep in mind that this is purely considering, if you would consider voting for this party, not a vote intention figure. There are other pollsters who have done vote intention with a Corbyn, Zarah Sultana-led party, and they get figures anywhere between sort of 8 and 15%. But yes, even in and of itself, 18% of the British electorate saying that they would consider voting for such a party is significant. And when we break that down by past vote, it's around about a third of those who backed Labour in the 2024 election, but it's almost 2/3 of those who backed the Green Party. So there is a bit of asymmetry there, and they will be threatening and they will be taking votes from many elements of that left-wing bloc of voters in British politics.
Really interesting stuff. Patrick, thank you. If you hang around for us as well, but I just want to bring in the panel at this point as well. It's tough starting up a new party from scratch, right? I mean, do you think there's any kind of space for them realistically?
Well, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary as a party this year and looking ahead to the Senate elections next year with unprecedented belief that we can have a Plaid Cymru-led government for the first time. I'm a Democrat. I believe in plurality of voices, but whilst Keir Starmer might be scratching his head a little bit for the situation in England this evening, in Wales, of course, we have in Plaid Cymru that more progressive alternative that reflects the deep disillusionment with both Labour leading Welsh government and Keir Starmer's
Jeremy Corbyn said he wants to kind of cover the whole of the UK, right?
They haven't got a party as yet. We'll see what happens there. But my point is, we are just a few months away from that Welsh election, where as many as a third of Labour voters from the last general election are saying, you know what, we're going to back Plaid next time, because there is that alternative there for them, ready with made in Wales policies. And
OK, we've got the party political messaging out there. That's ticked off. Do you think there is space for them? That's a question.
Well, I think we heard, from a pollster there, it's congested. And I think in England, I genuinely think Keir Starmer will be considering what the impact could be on them. You'll forgive me for looking at it from a Welsh perspective. And I'm sure, Scottish viewers might be thinking that the situation's different there too. But, they've got to see if they can get a party up and running. They haven't had the tidiest of starts. But the space isn't needed for it in Welsh politics in the same way because we're there. Well, we have that. We hear them talking about so many of the things that are important to us, and we reflect that disillusionment on PIP cuts and on the winter fuel cuts and on Gaza and on attacking the vulnerable. Plaid offers that in Wales.
Okay. Mercy, what's your take on this? Because we have seen, haven't we, historically, other parties trying to set up, believing that they've got a distinct message or something that's really important to get across. And it's hard, isn't it? It's not easy.
Yeah, we all remember Change UK with Chika, Amuna and Asubri. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is a threat to anybody, not least the Prime Minister. And I actually don't think that the setting up of this party, whatever it's going to be called in the end, is a threat to Labour insofar as, it's going to have any particular impact on Labour. It's more so the impact it will have in terms of taking votes away and then Reform potentially, sort of getting a bigger share of the vote than it would have done. And so I think splitting the left, I know Jeremy Corbyn thinks he's doing a very noble thing and he's sort of, taking the left in a direction that he would have wanted to take it, and he doesn't trust Keir Starmer and he probably doesn't think Labour is going in the right direction. But actually, I think what he'll be successful in doing is effectively making Reform more likely to actually perhaps come into government.
That's interesting about the influence it could have on dividing that vote.
And I think actually it's something we haven't mentioned is if votes for 16, 17-year-olds are going to come in, it will be interesting to see because, they tend to be more left-wing than not. And at the moment, there's not much polling done on how they would vote because they haven't been able to vote. But it would be interesting to see if a party of the hard left would win over 16 and 17-year-olds.
Right, let's ask Patrick. Patrick, have you got anything for us on that? Can you answer?
Yes, we've done quite a bit of digging around into this. As I say, the policy announcement was very interesting. Mercy's totally right. The younger generations, younger people do tend to start off at least quite left-wing and in support of left-wing parties, and as people age, they then tend to move more towards the political right for their answers. So I think we should expect, as right now Labour would be ahead with 16 to 18-year-olds, we believe, a Corbyn party would probably do quite well among that demographic. Indeed, among current 18 to 29, 24-year-olds, we're looking at much higher support for that party, around 36%, than we are the over 65s. That's 10%. And there's also an interesting regional story, just to touch on some of that. While around 30% of people in London would be open for voting for a Corbyn Zarah Sultana party, that drops all the way down to 16% when we look at Wales. So there are important geographical differences. There are areas where the party may or may not do well. And then one final point I would say is that a fundamental part of the 2024 general election was the way in which reform came through and hammered into the right-wing sort of coalition that the Conservatives had built over previous elections. And they split the political right in astronomical ways. And that was to the great benefit of Labour, who in many constituencies didn't even move or even decline in terms of vote share, but won heaps and heaps of seats because reform had taken away so much of the Conservative vote. So that is, I think I would agree, perhaps the key impact that this party could have if they start taking votes away from Labour in those marginals, in those constituencies. They might lose more than they otherwise would have done if it was a straight fight between them and the Conservatives or them and Reform UK.
It's really interesting about the kind of impact that these things can have. The other thing that I always think about too, with new parties and all parties really, is that you can change the political debate and policies without necessarily winning an election as well. And we've seen that with Reform. And I think I'd be interested to see if this party does it in particular on Gaza, right?
And also on Corbyn did bring together the young vote, for example, some years ago now, but it didn't lead to a victory for him in an election. And of course, those young people who are voting at 16 and 17 now won't have any idea what happened those years ago with the growth of momentum. Interesting to hear that confirmation that things might be a little bit different in Wales, but on something like Gaza, it is something that people tell us is really, really important to us in Wales. I wrote to the Prime Minister yesterday asking for action. These things are important to people. Talk is one thing, we need to take action on.
Yeah, do you think on Gaza it may be that this party does, I guess, put more pressure on number 10 and Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I think that's one of their clear motivations. I think we're talking about all of this in terms of party politics, but we're seeing from the last election the fracturing of major parties. People, when you look at the polls, there's sort of an even split, within the 20s, 30s of all of them, including Reform. And I think sometimes we look at that as Reform's doing increasingly well, but actually I think it's a breakdown of support for the major parties. And so Corbyn being able to point out Labour's weaknesses, one of which is Gaza, and so patently and so obviously, they're able to do it very bluntly without having to have any diplomatic finesse around that. I think that will be a problem for Labour. I mean, a cynic might say that Wes Streeting is being quite pro-Palestinian statehood because of how close a pro-Gaza independent came in his seat last time round. And you've got number 10 desperately thinking about other seats. You've got Rushanara Ali, you've got Shabana Mahmood. There are seats that they could actually lose based on a political party like Corbyn's just pointing out the fact of where they are in this policy. So even if they can't get masses of MPs, I think that's the role that they'll be doing.
Thanks very much indeed, and thank you both for your analysis on this too, and thank you as well to Patrick for that polling analysis as well. Now, just before we came on air, I spoke to Alice Campbell, Tony Blair's former Director of Communications, now, of course, famous for his podcast, The Rest of Politics. To get his take on the new party, we also spoke about the launch of the new Lost Boys task force that he's involved in. Now, the group's proposing a trusted adult guarantee scheme that would train 10,000 adults to act as role models to young people. Take a listen. Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's always good to talk to you. And I'm really interested to hear more about this Lost Boys project. Tell me about what's that all about?
Well, it really has flowed from all sorts of things coming together. You had Gareth Southgate's Dimbleby lecture, you had adolescence, and the kind of continuing debate about angry young men feeling lost and confused and all the stuff that we hear about. And it was actually a guy called Paul Barber, who's the chief executive of Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, who I think himself at one point was a bit lost and confused as a young man. But he was lucky enough to find a mentor who really kind of looked after him and helped him and supported him through it. So he asked me to join this task force, which is made up of all sorts of different people from business, from sport, from politics, but crucially also from young adults who have had the benefit of a trusted adult. And so what we've done is, rather than just kind of try and dive into everything, all the things that you might think are important, this is just to focus on this one call on the government, really, to support the idea of every young man having access to a trusted adult. And that's a kind of well-known concept of somebody outside the family that somebody feels they can go to for support, particularly when they're struggling. And it's not much money. It's basically a few £1 million. We're trying to get football clubs also funding this in part. And the government's role will be essentially to fund the training of 10,000 trusted adults in education and sports settings, particularly for boys growing up in poverty, and then help track the progress of this. So, I think it's a very simple, straightforward idea. I think it's just one thing. I'm not pretending this is going to, end all the problems of the manosphere, but I think it's just indicating that there are ideas out there, there are people really keen to help. And so that's it. That's what we're doing.
I'm really interested in this issue. Like you say, after adolescence, it felt like it was something we talked about an awful lot, and there's been a lot of debate about some of those other influences that people experience. We talk a lot about toxic masculinity, and I'll be honest, it's a phrase that I kind of hate, because I kind of think that, masculinity itself isn't toxic, it's something that we should celebrate. But, are you worried about the influence of some of these that some people have when it comes to, I guess, particularly in the digital space?
No, there's no doubt about that. I think that people talk a lot about Andrew Tate. I think Andrew Tate's maybe less influential than he was. I think, there's another project that's been going on recently, which you may have heard about. There was a big piece in The Observer about it at the weekend. Peter Hyman, my former colleague in Downing Street, he's actually been out talking to thousands of 17-year-olds just to find out what they're really thinking. And actually their online influences sometimes are a bit more surprising. But there's no doubt at all that the digital space has made it easier to groom people, to radicalise them in a way that maybe will turn them into people that they wouldn't, necessarily be if they were getting proper guidance, proper support within the family, within school and education, and so forth. And look, I get what you say about I agree with you, masculinity, there's nothing wrong with it. I think what people mean by toxic masculinity is when that slips into, misogyny, hatred of women, violence against women, the feeling that, young men should be allowed to do what the hell they want. I think that's what I think people mean by toxic masculinity. But I think what this has done, there was a interview on one of the radio stations this morning with a young guy who's been involved in this called Yas, and he talks very openly about the fact that if he hadn't, his trusted adult is a guy called Pedro, and if he's convinced that if he hadn't have got him at the time that he did, offering the support that he does, he'd either be dead or in prison. And he says that half of his friends are already dead or in prison. So I think there is a sense, and we're talking here about roughly 630,000 young people in England who don't have what we would define as a trusted adult outside the family. And I think that's, it's a big number. It's worth looking at.
So important, as you say. Have you ever felt like a lost boy yourself?
Well, maybe not a boy, but certainly a lost young man. And that probably started in childhood. I was lucky with two parents, loving family. I did actually have trusted adults outside the family, people I felt I could go and talk to, maybe about stuff that you didn't necessarily want to talk to people inside the family. But look, I had a drink problem in my early 20s. I mean, that came out somewhere. And so, and I think the thing is, I've always, you talk about toxic masculinity, I'm regularly called a quote alpha male. And I don't even know what it means, but I also do understand that I think young men in particular these days there is real sensitivity there is fear there is anger there. And of course, you're a politics programme. I always feel that in politics, you have politicians who exploit problems and politicians who address problems. And at the moment, the politicians who exploit problems, not least people like Farage on the right and Reform, that they're very, very loud. Nigel Farage very proudly has more followers on TikTok than every other MP combined. Well, TikTok is a massively important place in terms of where young men are engaging, insofar as they are engaging with politics and the political debate. So I think we've got to get more and better voices out there. And this is just one idea, as I say, to try to say to young men that who may be feeling lonely, may be feeling isolated and angry, that, maybe think about checking this out and finding the right person for you that you go to when you're struggling.
I think it's a great thing. I really do. As someone who I've been very aware about the debate that we have around girls and women, rightly, of course, but I think that sometimes it's important to realise that we need to do more talking about our boys and our young men.
Yeah. Well, because I actually don't buy the idea that feminism has won and that women have now got all the power and the top jobs. I think it's nonsense. However, I do think the fact that there has been so much focus on that debate means that sometimes young men think, well, it's all about the girls. The girls get everything. Now, it's not true, but it feeds into that sense of, nobody really cares about us. So I think it's just about showing, well, people do care and people do want to give people support.
While I've got you, I've got to ask about this new party that's launching today, involving, of course, Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana. I mean, do you think they're the real deal?
Well, no, but I do think it's a sign of a time when politics is maybe becoming more fragmented. Look, the Labour Party is in government. It's got a big majority. I think the way to deal with both Reform and a new left-wing party is actually, if the Labour government just to govern well and do the things that they said they were going to do. But there's no doubt Jeremy Corbyn has a following. He's got a certain appeal to a certain demographic. I think coming along at the time when Gaza is back, really back in the news. I mean, it should never have left the news, but it's right back there at the heart of it. I suspect that's why they've chosen now to launch this. But Labour's got to govern well and have the British people understand that they're governing for them. And, Jeremy Corbyn will do what Jeremy Corbyn does.
I mean, you mentioned there Gaza, and obviously part of the defining mission of this new party is to speak up for Palestine. Do you think that, I guess, Labour should have taken a tougher position when it comes to Gaza? Should they recognise Palestine as a state, for example?
Well, I would like them to, and I think that they should. But I'd like to see that, along with other countries doing the same thing, and along with a credible peace plan being put together. I think that one of the things that's happened is that because Donald Trump's president of America and there's so much focus on him, and because he doesn't believe in international institutions and he likes to cut other people out, it's almost as if the only power it feels in this debate is Israel itself, where I think it's abusing that power to the point of genocide and certainly crimes against humanity, and Trump. Well, the other countries are not powerless. I mean, they may be less powerful because the United Nations has been sort of cut down and the other international institutions. But I think that Britain still has a voice and people want to hear that voice. I actually think that there's some of the things that David Lammy was talking about the other day. He's done the right thing in all sorts of different areas. But an awful lot of people out there aren't really aware, don't really sense that Britain is really speaking up with the anger and the passion that people feel. Now, ultimately, the role of government is to try to get a ceasefire, get a peace deal in the end. And I think the role that Britain can play in that right now is actually to say, look, this isn't just about Israel and America. This is about the rest of the world. The whole world feels engaged in this. And I actually do think that recognition of Palestine will be part of some of the things that the British government can come together with other governments and really put it, make a mark on this.
OK, really good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for being on the programme.
Thanks a lot.
Alice Campbell speaking to me just before coming on air. Now, tens of thousands of resident doctors in England will go ahead with strikes from tomorrow. It's part of a long-running dispute over paying conditions. In a letter to doctors ahead of the walkout, the Health Secretary said he deeply regrets the position they find themselves in. And there are concerns about what NHS services could be disrupted as well. Here's our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi.
John, we've had the results back from the CT scan and everything's clear.
John is 88. He's an RAF veteran. He was brought here to the Royal Berkshire Hospital after suffering a nasty fall in his garden. It happened just as the hospital was preparing for its resident doctors to go on strike.
I was in the RAF for 30 years and the military were very loyal. We weren't able to strike. We went and did our duties where the Crown sent us.
Do you have any sympathy for resident doctors and the industrial action they're taking?
Not everything in life is give me when I want it. They are well-respected people of the community, and by doing this action, my feeling is that they're losing the respect of the community, and that is a terrible thing.
The walkout will have a wide-ranging disruptive impact on NHS services across the country. They come after resident doctors, then known as junior doctors, took part in 11 separate strikes over pay between 2023 and 2024, leading to hundreds of thousands of cancelled appointments.
We know mornings are better, we know that evenings are difficult, we know that nights are really difficult. So it is unpredictable, but we know that next week there'll be 5 days where we have 400 to 500 patients every day, and we'll need to have to find staff to meet that need.
The British Medical Association says resident doctor wages remain around 20% lower in real terms than in 2008 and are demanding pay restoration. The public is being advised to continue coming forward for care while the industrial action is going on.
The last period of industrial action, during that particular period, we cancelled over 500 patients who were coming in for an outpatient consultation, over 50 treatments. This time we're really trying to hold fast in terms of cancelling patients.
The BMA says that approach is in danger of stretching staff too thinly and could put patients at risk.
We need to look at what's happening on non-strike days and non-strike weeks. We have millions of appointments being cancelled because there isn't the staff are burnt out and staff are leaving.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says more pay isn't on the table, but he is willing to discuss other issues around working conditions. For now, patients like John will hope that the impact of these strikes on the NHS won't affect their treatment. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, at the Royal Berkshire Hospital.
Well, Ashish is here with us now. This is just what Labour didn't want to happen, right, the government. Is there anything that they can do to try and mitigate the effect of it?
Yes, the battleground has now shifted. What you're going to see during this strike action that you didn't see in the last 2 years of industrial strike action is NHS England has been instructed by Wes Streeting to act on a local level. So NHS leaders will be allowed to decide which patients they see. So previously, you've had all appointments cancelled and only the most urgent cases who were sent into ED, accident and emergency, as it's also known, they were the ones who were seen. So the doors of the emergency department were open, but the rest of the hospital was closed. But now, because Wes Streeting is so concerned about the impact on waiting lists, he's told local NHS trusts, you decide. You work out the staffing numbers, you decide which patients to see. So if you're on a cancer pathway and you need urgent treatment because that's part of your urgent cancer care, you are deemed emergency so you can be seen. And the BMA are not happy about this at all because, one, they think they will put the hospitals and the trusts and NHS England will put more patients at risk because they don't have the staffing levels to deal with these patients. And two, obviously, if you read the subtext, that will mitigate some of the impact of the strike action because if patients are still being seen and they're having their appointments, then is this strike action really going to bite the way it should? That's one way of reading it.
Yeah,
but they're
really
worried.
interesting.
They will say that they're really concerned about staff safety. These patients shouldn't be seen at all.
It's really interesting. I just want to stay with us. I just want to bring in Irene and Mercy at this point as well. Mercy, where do you think the public's head is at over these strikes?
Yeah, well, polls have shown that, the public are actually more supportive than you would tend to think. You'd sort of think, well, if patients are being put at risk and lives are being put at risk, there'd be enormous sort of opposition against it. But that's actually not the case often when you look at polling. But I do think it will change, and that's because they had this increase not long ago, and now, that's good, and that's gone. And it's this 29% figure that people will really say, look, we'd all love a 29% pay increase. Of course we would. And, people completely take the point that it's been a real terms cut, and that's been the case for everybody in the country. So I think it's starting to look greedy, and I think that's what the public really will be left with, and perhaps that will sort of start to see public perception for the strikes going in negative direction.
It's optics, and that's a really interesting point. What you're going to see tomorrow is the BMA issuing adverts and in all the newspapers talking about exactly that. They understand the optics are bad. What they'll say, they won't say we want 29%. They'll say a junior doctor is paid £18 less than a doctor's assistant. So should your resident doctor be earning more than a doctor's assistant? Yes, they should be. So to counter that, that's exactly what the BMA will do.
So it's almost like the kind of the PR war sort of going on
it's
by
optics,
both sides.
isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you say you want a 29% pay rise, the public says, wow, that's a lot of money. But if you say, well, actually, they're earning £18 an hour, is that what a resident doctor who spent so long training to be a doctor should be earning? Or should it be 22, which is what they're asking for? So that £4 looks very different to 29%.
What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I think it really is important that people understand what has been happening with wages over the years. There isn't a strike in Wales this time, but the same issues, there's the same disquiet in Wales, and we have had strikes in Wales too. One thing is important to remember is that doctors don't go into it just for the money, but they need to be paid properly, and also they need to feel that they are working within a sustainable health system. And that's something that we as a party are concentrating very clearly on. How do we build that sustainability so they're supported and the patient are able to go through the system quicker by not having those backlogs that have become so endemic within the NHS in Wales?
Is there, a fairness argument, because there are so many other people in the public sector, like nurses or teachers as well, who I guess might be looking at this thinking, well, why is it the resident doctors who are...
Well, I mean, we've gone through the same issues with the need for restoration of wages with nurses too, with teachers also. This is what happens when you have many, many years of, they used to call it austerity, let's call it what it is, cuts in public spending, as we saw under the last Conservative government and continued under Labour. It has an impact. So then you have to say, OK, where do we go from here to make sure we work towards that pay, which is reflective of the skills, but also make sure that the system itself is sustainable?
I guess that is it. Where do we go from here, do you think?
Well, negotiation, but they are two sides who are so deeply entrenched. I called it wrong last week when you put me on the spot.
I wondered if you're going to bring this up.
Well, I called it wrong, and that's because I completely misjudged the mood in both camps. West Streeting does not want to be held to ransom while he's trying to push through the 10-year plan. The resident doctors will say, this is a war that's been going on for 17 years. We're talking about 17 years of pay restoration. We're not just going to give up our fight overnight like that. So I called it wrong because I misjudged just how deeply entrenched they are. And I think the war of words is going to become even more bitter and acrimonious.
I was with you. And the other thing I'd say is this shows you why you're one of the best, Ashish, because you are accountable right to the end, and we're here for it.
A poor punter, but a better journalist, I hope.
That's fair. That's very fair. Thanks all very much indeed. Well, of course, the resident doctor strikes are one of the stories sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and the Belfast Telegraph columnist, Alison Morris. Now, for almost a generation, like many other countries, we've enjoyed a peace dividend. Not having to spend so much on defence means more money for other things. But, of course, Putin's invasion of Ukraine brought decades of peace in Europe to a sudden end. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has been looking at the challenge the PM faces now in welfare versus warfare.
Welfare versus warfare. For decades, there was a clear winner. As the Cold War ended, successive governments banked the so-called peace dividend, running down their armies to invest money in the welfare state instead, until war visited the edges of Europe once more and everything changed. Our Prime Minister, like other Western leaders, is facing up to a new reality that the era of peace is over. We're on a war footing and Europe must rearm. That's why the debate over welfare versus warfare is much more than just about difficult choices. It's about a much more profound debate over a radically changing world and what the essence of leadership really is, because the duty of any Prime Minister, first and foremost, is to defend the realm. That requires a shift not just from government, but from the public too. And whilst 49% of people recognise defence spending needs to increase, 53% don't want this to come out of other areas of public spending. And they definitely don't want to pay more tax. But without real economic growth, the government has to make choices. In recent weeks, it's been trying to reform welfare to garner billions of savings.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260.
Only to fold in the face of opposition from Labour MPs, the government dropping $5 billion of welfare cuts to avoid a potentially devastating Commons defeat. What did you think when you initially heard the government were trying to reduce the bill a bit or slow the growth of the bill?
Well, I was cheering them on. The reason that the welfare bill effectively collapsed was because it was made on the basis of fiscal arguments that, the Chancellor needed to find £5 billion. I think we need to make the moral argument that the way our welfare system works at the moment is immoral, frankly.
Were you very frustrated when the government basically pulled all the PIP reform?
I was massively frustrated, massively disappointed for two reasons. First of all, because it's terrible for people who are currently being trapped on welfare. But secondly, because the risk is that the consequence of that is that we get trapped in a doom loop of ever higher taxes and ever lower growth.
That's the dilemma the PM's now facing as he weighs up tax rises in the autumn. Do you think that the challenge he's got, and this is playing out with the welfare argument that they've had, is that the party's instinct, if not the leadership's, is to prioritise welfare over warfare?
Look, I think it's impossible not to give Keir Starmer credit for what he's done in the international stage. When Zelensky was kiboshed in the White House, Keir leapt to his defence. Keir has engaged with President Trump in a way that no other leader in the world has been able to. And so much of the time that he's spent with Trump, he hasn't spent with Labour members of Parliament. And there's a playoff there, and he's done the right thing in engaging with Trump, because that is strategic. No Labour politician comes into politics to cut welfare, schools or other budgets, but on the basis that defence is non-negotiable. Everything else, unfortunately, may face those cuts.
So for you, if it came to welfare versus warfare, you're clear where the money needs to go?
I think President Putin gives us no choice.
But the problem Sir Keir Starmer has is that many of his MPs don't want to make that choice. They want more spending on warfare and welfare, even as the economy slows. And so now the government finds itself in an unenvious position of having committed more money to defence spending, now having an unexpected hole in its public finances after MPs rejected cuts to the welfare budget. Now the conversation is moving instead to tax rises. But that just delays a problem unresolved, which is how does a government begin to spend billions more on defence whilst also trying to maintain a welfare state in a way that the public have got used to? Without real economic growth to help pay for public services, the government will have to make a choice and warfare will win out. What's less clear is how the Prime Minister manages to take his party and the people with him. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, look, we've got a big international visit to to the UK tomorrow because Donald Trump is coming back. The US president flies into Scotland for a 4-day trip where he's going to visit his golf courses, of course, and also, of course, catch up with the PM. It's his first journey across the Atlantic since his re-election, but he's certainly familiar with the Scottish green.
It's a very special place for me. A lot of that has to do with the fact that my mother, as you know, was born in Scotland. She came to the United States when she was 21 years old. I heard there were going to be a big protest today. Nobody showed up. There were 3 people and a dog.
We can check into Rune and Mercy. Golfers, either of you, or...?
I love playing golf. In theory, I used to play a lot when I was a kid. I don't know how the President of America seems to be able to spend so much time on the golf course. Politics completely killed off the time I have to play.
Yeah, it's all day, right?
Golf.
Unless you do a bit of crazy golf, which I did yesterday, actually. I love a bit of crazy golf, but yeah.
Well, I watched some golf on the weekend, and now I can't tell you what tournament it was. I don't know what, but
it was the Open.
Yeah.
Thank you. And because before I didn't understand golf, quite frankly, but I actually quite enjoyed the Open.
No, it's quite good.
Yeah,
Watching golf is actually surprisingly good.
I get it now. I get it.
Yeah. It's a kind of psychological thing, and you can just see people kind of crumbling or getting. It's a great spectator sport, I have to say. Would you invite Donald Trump to Wales?
I'm not sure about inviting, but of course, if he was there and I had the honour of being the First Minister of Wales after next year, I'd, of course, meet him and share why I believe our values in Wales are perhaps different to some of the ones that he's been reflecting.
Show him some of the Welsh golf courses to rival Scotland.
Very, very fine. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think about the Donald Trump visit? I mean, look, he was kind of mocking there, wasn't he, about only 3 people and his dog turning up on a protest. Do you think that people, I guess, are more accepting this time round? Or?
No, I don't think they are. But, you know, he actually quite likes it, I think. You know, that's what fuels him, isn't it? The fact that there's all this vehement opposition against him. I think that actually, you know, quite gives him fuel and it makes he's a fighter. That's the image he wants to portray of himself. But, you know, on a serious note, I think we should absolutely welcome the President of the United States having such an affinity with one of our nations, having an affinity with the UK in general, but Scotland in particular because of the familial ties.
But we should also, you know, take every opportunity to say why our values, I think, are different to so many of those that he has portrayed in his 2 spells as President of the United States.
You can do that while you're taking around some of those Welsh golf courses, right? Long chats to...
Yeah, I'm not sure about a game of golf with him, but yeah, we...
It's interesting, isn't it, the kind of Scotland tie as well? I mean, the Prime Minister hasn't been shy of kind of using some of, I guess, you know, the things that we know that Donald Trump loves in order to build that special relationship, right?
Yeah, and, you know, I say, why shouldn't we? And, of course, I get the facts, you know, people think our values are against this, but he's a democratically elected leader, and a lot of his opposition against him from people in this country is because of what he's doing on immigration. And actually, he said that's what he would do, and he was elected, and he's doing what he said he'd do. So, yeah, we need to remember we're also Democrats as well.
Thanks both very much indeed. Great to have you both on the programme this evening. Well, that is it from us this evening and this week, I should say. I'll see you next Monday at 7 p.m. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee, and then at 9 p.m, you've got The World with Yalda Hakeem. But I'll see you on Monday. Have a good Friday and a good weekend after that.